Despite the One Piece story being mostly light and comedic, it is in fact also full of political conflict. There have actually been several assassination attempts happen throughout the course of the series, and even the Straw Hats themselves have resorted to trying to assassinate some of their enemies. This video is going to break down what I think are the 4 biggest assassination attempts that have happened in One Piece. The targets of these assassinations were all major political figures in the world of One Piece, and these assassinations were actually just the tip of the iceberg on much larger conspiracies surrounding them. Funny enough, the event we're going to start with is the unsuccessful assassination attempt of President Iceberg, the mayor of Water 7. A day after the Straw Hats arrived at Water 7, President Iceberg was attacked in the middle of the night by an unknown assailant. Iceberg was shot twice in the front and 3 times in the back. While Iceberg survived this attack, he subsequently went into a coma. The assassination was very mysterious, as the culprit managed to enter Iceberg's home without breaking any of the locks, and the only clue left at the crime scene was a single white mask. The attempt on the president's life was very surprising to the general public, as Iceberg was a figure seemingly loved by everyone, with no known enemies. After regaining consciousness, Iceberg actually remembered what had happened. According to him, there had been 2 assassins. One was a large figure wearing a mask, the other, to everyone's surprise, was Nico Robin, the archaeologist of the Straw Hat crew. This revelation caused the city of Water 7 to start a manhunt of the Straw Hat pirates. Luffy himself was convinced that Robin would have never done something like that, though some of the crew started to question if Robin was actually their friend. They would soon get their answers though, as on the following night, 5 masked assassins, including Robin, attacked the Galila building and ran through all of Iceberg's security. By this time, however, Iceberg had figured out who the ones behind the attacks were. It was Cypherball 9, a top-secret agency under the world government. What CP9 were after were the blueprints of the ancient weapon Pluton that they had correctly deduced were in Iceberg's possession. The reason for their first attempt on Iceberg the previous day wasn't to actually kill him, but to simply put the blame on the Straw Hat pirates. That way, CP9 could complete their mission by targeting Iceberg again the following day, and the people would naturally assume it was the Straw Hats. The only reason why Robin was helping CP9 was because they were threatening to send a Marine Buster call against the Straw Hats if she didn't. CP9 were however duped by Iceberg, where even though he was holding blueprints of Pluton, they were actually fake, as he had expected the government to target him at some point. What Iceberg however did not expect was that the CP9 agents were in fact his own employees, the Galila shipwrights. The only reason they'd ever started working for Iceberg was to get their hands on the blueprints, a process that had taken them 5 years. Despite Iceberg tricking them with the faked blueprints, CP9 however quickly remedied this failure. Rob Lucci of CP9 displayed his deductive skills by on the spot figuring out that Iceberg had given them to his childhood friend, Frankie. Having no more use for Iceberg, the agents decided to eliminate him then and there by leaving him tied up in the burning Galila building. This attempt was later foiled by Chopper of all characters, who managed to rescue Iceberg from being burned alive. Having learned the truth and owing his life to the Straw Hats, Iceberg then cleared their names and did everything he could to support the crew. Iceberg's assassination attempt, or technically attempts, serve as a very good example of the conspiratorial nature of political assassinations, which is that they often serve a grander purpose. In this case, the main motive of the assassins wasn't to eliminate Iceberg, but to simply get their hands on the blueprints of a super weapon. The plot also involved a lot of subterfuge, such as the assassins having infiltrated their target staff for years and them trying to pin the murder on the Straw Hats. While the Straw Hats were innocent during Water 7, this does not mean that the crew is however above committing assassinations. In fact, years after Water 7, the Straw Hats would be directly involved in an assassination plot of one of the most powerful pirates in the world. During the Whole Cake Island arc, Luffy and the Straw Hats were generally working only to achieve one simple goal: to get Sanji back from the Big Mom pirates. They however had little expectation on just how complicated achieving this seemingly simple task would be. Sanji, a secret prince of the Germa kingdom, had been forced into a marriage with one of Emperor Big Mom's daughters. Sanji himself had been blackmailed into this situation by his father, threatening the life of Seth, Sanji's adoptive father. Sanji's biological father, Windsmoke Judge, wanted to create a military alliance with the Big Mom pirates through the marriage. Little did he know, however, that Big Mom was actually manipulating him all that time. Big Mom was only interested in Judge's technology, and planned on taking all of it after first assassinating the entire Windsmoke family during Sanji's wedding. Despite how they treated him, Sanji could not help himself, and wanted to rescue his family from this fate after hearing about the assassination plot. This arguably caused one of the most unexpected plot lines in the entire One Piece story, where the Straw Hat Pirates' solution was to participate in their own plot to crash Sanji's wedding, rescue the Windsmoke family, and assassinate Big Mom. Granted, this plot was actually not the creation of Luffy, but of Capone, a pirate in charge of the Big Mom pirate's security during the wedding. After learning that Big Mom planned on killing Sanji's family, the Straw Hats made a temporary alliance with Capone. Capone himself had only ever joined Big Mom so that he could later assassinate her, earning him infamy throughout the world as the man who managed to kill an emperor of the sea. The assassination plan itself was far more challenging than, for example, CP9's attempt on Iceberg. Big Mom was a superhuman freak, one of the strongest pirates in the whole world, capable of personally destroying countries and surviving inhuman amounts of damage. The Straw Hats even doubted if assassinating her was something that was actually possible. Capone's plan was to trigger a traumatic reaction in Big Mom by destroying the picture of her savior, Mother Caramel. Capone knew that harming the picture would cause Big Mom to emit a scream that could incapacitate all bystanders as well as making her vulnerable to attacks. Capone's plan was to protect him and his followers' hearings with earplugs and shooting Big Mom with missiles of toxic gas after breaking the picture. This was, however, easier said than done. Not only would Big Mom herself be at full power before someone broke the picture, but the wedding was also full of the Big Mom pirates' top fighters, who were infamous pirates in their own right. To add to this, Big Mom's strongest subordinate, Charlotte Katakuri, had the ability to see into the literal future with his observation haki, making any attempted assassination even more difficult. This assassination plot was arguably the One Piece story at its most complex. There was not only one, but two separate assassination conspiracies going on at the same time during Sanji's wedding. The Windsmoke family had no knowledge of either plot. The Big Mom pirates only knew of their own plan to assassinate the Windsmokes, and the Straw Hats knew of Big Mom's plan, as well as their own plan to assassinate Big Mom herself. Add to this the political machinations surrounding the wedding, the uneasy alliance between Luffy and Capone, and a man who could literally see into the future being present at the wedding. Naturally, the wedding ended up being an extremely chaotic affair. The Straw Hats actually managed to take Big Mom off guard, by not only Sanji preventing his own assassination, but by Luffy destroying Big Mom's wedding cake. And while the Big Mom pirates proved to be as difficult to deal with as they had expected, Brook actually managed to destroy Mother Caramel's photo. The assassination, however, ended in failure. When Capone and his men tried to kill Big Mom by shooting the missiles at her, she screamed them away, exploding the missiles in mid-air. While the mission failed in assassinating Big Mom, the Straw Hats did, however, succeed in rescuing Sanji's family. Therefore, both the Big Mom pirates' assassination attempt on the Windsmoke and the Straw Hat pirates' assassination attempt on Big Mom herself ended in failure. The Big Mom assassination plot could be seen as giving the opposite perspective compared to the Iceberg assassination. With Iceberg, the story revolved around the mystery of the Straw Hats figuring out who had shot him. With Big Mom, the Straw Hats were actually on the side of the assassins, and the story focused on seeing all the planning that went into the assassination and how it would actually work in practice. It also is a good example of just how ruthless the Straw Hat pirates are willing to be if necessary. By his own admission, Luffy is no hero, and this can be clearly seen in him being willing to work with a villain like Capone, and Luffy being okay with Big Mom being killed in such an underhanded way. While Big Mom was an emperor of the sea and one of the most powerful figures in the One Piece world, there have actually been two other assassination plots in the story bigger than the attempt on her life. What's more, just like with Iceberg, both of these were orchestrated by the world government. The third assassination attempt covered in this video is that of Edward Newgate, aka Whitebeard, who was the second most infamous pirate in history, only behind the Pirate King himself. The assassination attempt on Whitebeard happened during the Summit War, when the Whitebeard pirates were willing to fight a war against the world government just to stop them from executing Ace, one of their crewmates. Knowing that Whitebeard would make a move on them, the government mobilized most of their available manpower to oversee Ace's execution at Marine headquarters. This included virtually all of the world's high-ranking Marines, and 5 of the 7 warlords. Despite all the strength they had gathered for the execution, however, the government planned on ending the war right at the beginning, by having one of Whitebeard's own men assassinate him. This was a plot created by Fleet Admiral Sengoku and Admiral Akainu. Before the start of the war, most of the world and even most of Whitebeard's crew had no idea that Ace was in fact the son of Gold Roger, the Pirate King. Sengoku and Akainu used this to their advantage, with Akainu before the war contacting Squard, one of Whitebeard's subordinate captains. In the past, Roger had actually massacred all of Squard's crew, making Squard incredibly resentful of Roger even after his death. Akainu fed Squard a lie that the entire Summit War was simply a deal between Whitebeard and Sengoku, where Whitebeard would deliver his 43 subordinate crews to the Marines in exchange for Ace and Whitebeard's main crew not being harmed. Akainu pretended to be against this operation, telling Squard that him and his crew would be spared if he personally killed Whitebeard. Because of his hatred of Roger, Squard actually believed Akainu's words. After the war started, Squard personally went to Whitebeard with the pretense of discussing the battle with him. Shocking Whitebeard and all the onlookers though, Squard unsheathed his sword and stabbed Whitebeard in the chest. While Whitebeard collapsed to his knees, he did actually survive this assassination attempt. This was not too unexpected, considering that we later see Whitebeard still being alive after taking attacks such as him getting punched in the chest with magma after a heart attack or getting the side of his head wiped off. This attempt on Whitebeard's life did however shock everyone even if it did not kill him. Whitebeard's right-hand man, Marco, believes that Whitebeard should have been able to dodge an attack even from an ally, thinking that his illness must have gotten worse than expected. Squart ironically agrees with this, thinking that it was a miracle he actually managed to land the attack on Whitebeard. It is actually possible that Sengoku and Akainu also predicted this outcome. While they would have been glad if Whitebeard had died, they probably knew that someone like Squart wasn't strong enough to get the job done. Arguably, their main aim with this plot wasn't so much Whitebeard's death, but turning all the subordinate crews on the Whitebeard pirates by making them believe that Whitebeard had betrayed them, taking away a significant portion of Whitebeard's manpower. Whitebeard did however counter this plot by opening a way out for the subordinate crews, telling them that any of them could leave the battle if they so wanted. This third assassination attempt offers a glimpse into how underhanded the Marines can be despite being the so-called servants of justice. We actually see this again later in the Marineford arc, where the reason why Akainu ultimately manages to kill Ace is because he manipulated his devotion to Whitebeard. Even though Whitebeard was a pirate touted as being second only to Roger, there is arguably an even more important figure in the story who fell victim to an assassination attempt. Before I reveal who this character is though, I'd really appreciate it if you liked this video. I don't really know how well this video will perform, but I'm pretty sure the more likes it gets, the better its chances are going to be. The arguably biggest assassination attempt that we've ever seen happen in One Piece is that of Dr. Vegapunk in the Egghead arc. Prior to the arc, the world government had discovered that Vegapunk had been studying the events of the Void Century, which is essentially the biggest taboo in the One Piece world. The government was leaked this information by York, one of Vegapunk's 6 clones of himself. As York embodied Vegapunk's personality of greed, she wanted the government to grant her the position of a celestial dragon, and to live in the Holy Land in exchange for her loyalty. As Vegapunk was the man responsible for most of the world government's scientific advancement, and a figure beloved throughout the One Piece world, the 5 elders wanted to confirm that he had indeed betrayed them, sending several agents to Egghead Island. Wanting to make sure that the government would agree to her deal, York kidnapped these agents in an effort to make the elders be more suspicious of Vegapunk. To further prove her loyalty, York smuggled the elders a sample of the Mother Flame energy source, which they could use to fuel their super weapon capable of destroying entire islands. Due to unfortunate circumstances, the government shortly after this ended up using the weapon to completely destroy the country of Lulusia Kingdom. After this, the clock was ticking. The government was already suspicious of Vegapunk having betrayed them. After they'd now used his invention to wipe an entire country off the map, the risk of Vegapunk fully turning on them had become incredibly high. The 5 elders then decided to commit to a plan to assassinate Vegapunk. The government's plan was to send a team of CP0 agents to Egghead Island to kill Vegapunk. However, knowing how resourceful Vegapunk was and that Egghead held considerable military strength, they also made a backup plan, where a war fleet led by Saint Saturn and Admiral Kizaru was also sent to the island. Interestingly, the CP0 agents the government initially sent to Egghead were the very same agents they'd years ago used in the assassination of Iceberg. Fittingly, just like 2 years ago at Water 7, the government's plans were once again interrupted by the Straw Hats. By coincidence, right before the start of the Egghead operation, the Straw Hat pirates sailed to the island and created an unexpected alliance with Vegapunk. Due to the Straw Hats' intervention, the initial attack by CP0 was foiled. This caused the government to rely on their backup plan, which essentially caused a war to erupt on Egghead Island between the Straw Hats and the government forces. During the fighting, the government actually managed to inflict multiple seemingly lethal blows on Vegapunk, potentially succeeding in their initial mission to assassinate him. As of the making of this video, it still cannot be confirmed whether Vegapunk actually survived these attacks. Arguably, the government from their perspective were absolutely correct in their decision to eliminate Vegapunk. In hindsight, Vegapunk proved himself to arguably be the biggest enemy the world government has ever faced in the 800 years that they've been in power. Vegapunk was not only studying the ancient history as they thought, but he also successfully managed to broadcast to the entire world everything he'd learned. This was a disaster for the government, and essentially pulled off the mask they had been wearing for hundreds of years, revealing to the entire world that they're a monstrous tyranny that could potentially sink the entire world. Vegapunk only added to his betrayal by also sabotaging all the pacifista that looked like Kuma to obey Bonnie above anyone else in the world, compromising a huge part of the government's military power. While not as personally strong as the likes of Whitebeard or Big Mom, Vegapunk is still arguably a more significant figure in the One Piece world than either of them, with his inventions being responsible for some of the biggest developments in the entire story. Right before going to Egghead, Lucci fittingly calls Vegapunk the most useful person in the world. indicating just how big of a deal his assassination would be. In summary, this video went over what I think were the 4 biggest assassination attempts in the One Piece story. With all 4 of these events, the assassination was actually only a part of a much larger plan, meant to accomplish much more than the death of one individual. These were also hardly the only assassination attempts that have occurred in the One Piece story, proving just how complex and political the One Piece story actually is beneath the surface. If you'd like to hear more of me talking about One Piece, I have another video on this channel discussing a potential devil fruit that could make a character survive any assassination attempt by allowing them to rise from the dead. Click right here to watch my video on why a Christ devil fruit could genuinely exist in One Piece. Thanks for watching the video to the end.